Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss Thailand's deepening political crisis. A democratically elected government has been forced to cut short its tenure because of public protests. After the pro-royalist Democrat Party MPs resigned en masse, Thai Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra called for the dissolution of parliament on December 8th last year. New elections were announced for February 2nd, 2014. Shinwatra's ruling Pheu Thai party is widely believed to win or expected to win these elections, if they are held that is. Fearing this perhaps, the anti-government protesters led by Democrat Party's former Deputy Prime Minister Suthep Thaugsuban have blockaded Bangkok. They want the elections to be called off. The alternative being proposed by the Democrat Party is ruled by a People's Council for 18 months to implement a so-called agenda of reforming politics. If the situation worsens, one does not know how the Thai army or the Thai king will react. To analyze the contours of the Thai political crisis, I have with me three distinguished diplomats. We have with us Ambassador Vivek Karju. He was Secretary in the Ministry of External Affairs, has been India's ambassador to Afghanistan, Myanmar and Thailand. Ambassador Ranjit Gupta. He is a veteran diplomat who has served across the world on Indian missions. He was India's ambassador to Yemen, North Yemen, Venezuela, Oman, Spain and Thailand. And we also have with us my old friend Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarti. He too was a Secretary in Ministry of External Affairs and also served as High Commissioner to Bangladesh and Ambassador to Thailand. So as you would have noticed, all of them know Thailand very well. So Vivek, let me begin with you. Are these protests in Bangkok essentially a result of the fear that Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra is really a proxy for her ousted brother, ousted Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra?
Yes, of course. She is a proxy for the former Prime Minister Thaksin. But the seeds of this crisis are much deeper because they indicate a split which is down the line in the Thai political system and society between the old elites which are Bangkok based and the new emerging classes which derive their political strength from the populous and the poorer areas of the north and the northeast called the Isan. So until this is resolved and a solution is found for this in this basic contradiction in Thailand, things will not become normal.
Ambassador Gupta, so do you agree with Vivek that the crisis really is between the urban elite, the traditional ruling class of Thailand, and the emerging classes? He says emerging classes, I would say the rural Thailand, where Pheu Thai party has its base.
Yes, I would say more than emerging classes, it is a big divide between the rural and Bangkok, not other cities, mind you. Yeah. So it is not urban all over Thailand. The north and northeast are his particular, Thaksin Shinawatra's particular support base, and her sister is a completely, it's like Bharat waiting, keeping the throne warm for Rama to return from exile.
But isn't the crisis slightly deeper in the sense that most of the constituencies are rural? So the rural, or let's say the rural constituencies outnumber the Bangkok constituencies.
In a free and fair election, there is no question but that any party, because he has created several parties, will win hands down. So how this issue is going to be resolved in the long term remains to be seen.
Yeah, we will discuss that. Pinak, you know, there was an attempt by Prime Minister Yingluck Shinwatra's party to bring in a law to grant amnesty to a number of politicians, including her brother Thaksin Shinawatra. But there was opposition and the bill was defeated by the Senate. So if that demand has been met, why are these protests continuing?
Let me just go back to what was said just before by my distinguished colleagues. It's about the divide that they talked about. It's the divide, but I would like to add that the southern part of Thailand is also with the Democrats and the Royalists. But indeed, they can never win an election because of the numbers. And about the constitutional amendment, yes, it was of course defeated. I mean, it was passed, but then it was turned down by the Senate, and then it had to be sent back. and then it led to all kinds of other complications. Indeed, the constitutional amendment sought to provide amnesty not just to the former Prime Minister Thaksin,
but also to Abhisit
but
Vijayvargiya,
also to others who were part. I mean, after all, former Prime Minister Abhisit Vijayvargiya has been accused of murder for the 2010,
but it also granted amnesty to the man who's leading these protests.
Also, they were all included. So I think they tried to do a more broad-based sort of an amnesty. And by the way, it also included some of the generals who were involved in that crackdown.
Vivek, there was also opposition to the upper house, the Senate, being fully elected. Why was there an opposition to that?
That is the crucial thing. Because the Senate is, because of its composition between elected and nominated members, is the brake on what one can say would be the political ambitions of Thaksin and his group. They are relying on the purely democratic principle of one person, one vote. Now, as we understand it in India, that's perfectly fair and fine. But in Thailand's context, this principle has not been accepted fully by what I call the old elites.
No, but the court has also turned it down.
No, but what does the court represent? Because in this divide, all institutions are split down the middle. And some of these institutions, and we can talk about those, represent still the bastions of the old elite.
Now, the anti-government protesters, Pinak, don't want the election to be held on February 2nd. In fact, they don't want elections as of now. So, how will the crisis get resolved if you don't have elections? On the other hand, if you hold elections and Shinwatra's party comes with a greater majority, the opposition stands to lose much more. So, where do we go from here?
I think there is an impasse at the moment, because rightly, I think Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra has said, okay, let's have elections, let the people decide. But as we just discussed, the result is a foregone conclusion. And this unelected council, I mean, this is fundamentally wrong about democracy, that how can you have an unelected council? I see a little parallel with Bangladesh, where the opposition suddenly demanded a neutral, although Bangladesh did have an experience of having neutral. But there the parallel ends, I suppose. And but I think what Ambassador Kajju said about democracy hasn't functioned the way it should have. That is the motive.
Ambassador Gupta, quickly, do you think the election will be postponed?
It would appear that it will be postponed, or as has happened in the past, they will boycott it, which will mean that by default, instead of legitimately getting an overwhelming majority, they will still get a majority, but by default.
Okay, quickly.
Get one sentence. You know, we find it very difficult to comprehend this, because when we adopted the one man, one vote, it's amazing that all sections of India which were privileged accepted that principle and the logic of that principle. In these societies, it still is being contested.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We will be back again with this discussion in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We are discussing the unfolding political crisis in Thailand. Ambassador Gupta, you wanted to say something before we went on the break.
Well, you see, the bigger picture is that Thailand has consistently faced political crises of one kind or another. I was there from January 1994 to November 1997. There were 4 prime ministers, 11 finance ministers, 9 foreign ministers. Thaksin Shinawatра's government, which was elected in 2001, was the first and only government which completed its first term. The mechanics of the protest, their politics is personality oriented, and demonization of personalities, not ideas oriented.
Okay.
So that is a big problem.
All right, but Vivek, let's talk about the potential role of the army. There have been 19 coups in Thailand since 1932, and the last coup was in 2006 against Thaksin Shinawatra. And in the process, the army, some people believe, has lost prestige and created instability. How decisive is the role of the army in Thailand, and is it a force for stability or a force for instability in the current conditions?
I think your second question cannot be answered easily, because it all depends on how do you construe stability. Yet the army too was an instrument of the old Bangkok elite, as Ambassador Gupta
Bangkok
said.
elite as different from the monarchy, is it?
No, the monarchy
is part of the Bangkok elite.
It is at the apex of the Bangkok
elite.
Correct.
And the army was
Yeah.
the ultimate sort of power grabber
Yeah.
of the Bangkok elite.
Yeah.
Now, Thaksin Shinawatra introduced a completely new principle, and that is why neither the army intervention nor, quite frankly, His Majesty
What
the
new
King,
principle?
the new principle was drawing in and reaching out to the north and the northeast, to the local populations, to the populations there, to show that he was introducing a kind of politics which would cater to their welfare.
Okay.
Now,
Yeah, Ambassador Gupta, do you think that the anti-government forces currently out in the streets of Bangkok want to force the army to step in? And does the army represent only the interests of the Bangkok elite, or I mean, is it a monolith, or does it represent other interests? Because people say there are sections of the army who are called watermelons, green on the outside, red inside, red being the color of Shinwatra's party.
In the rank and file, there is a great deal of sympathy for what Thaksin stands for. So the old monolithic army is changing and changing rapidly, and therefore the officer cadre, which still is part of the Bangkok elite very largely, will have to think twice to keep throwing out democratically elected governments. But this is a thing which is going to continue for several years. They may well throw them out, but another government will come in. The army has been an integral part of Thai politics for the last so many decades.
Absolutely.
And it's not about to finish very soon.
Okay. Pinak, the current army chief, when he was asked about the possibility of a coup, he said the door to a coup is neither open nor shut. Now, where does that leave Prime Minister Yingluck Shinwatra's government? Is the army leaving the option of a coup open, or is it more aimed at preventing a civil war? Telling the government that, look, don't be too harsh on the protesters. You know, Thai protests are nothing like Indian protests. They're very disciplined protests, and even when counter groups, groups opposed to each other are protesting, they protest in separate areas so that they don't come into conflict. So is the army basically telling the government, don't call in your supporters from the rural, from the countryside, and wants to prevent a civil war?
Well, since you've started talking about the army and about the coups and the number of coups that have happened, I might as well go back to an anecdotal thing about in the 50s and 60s when there were coups and counter coups and all kinds of things. And the anecdote goes something like this, that Thailand had 3 political parties, the army, navy and the air force. And they would do coups and counter coups against each other. So that's the history, and that's the background of the Thai army. And the fact that the general has said, basically sending also a signal that, by the way, Thai protests on the streets are very unlike our protests. They are far more disciplined, and I think it's part picnic and part protests. And because I've been there during the famous protests of the red shirts, and I walked through these crowd, and there were children, there were families, and they offered me all kinds of things to eat in the process. But so it's more like a picnic. But coming back to what the Thai army will do, my sense is that their coup will be something of a last resort. I mean, if there is a lot of violence and chaos, because and I think that is what has made Prime Minister Yingluck very careful about using force to disperse these people. And she's done the right thing, I think, by wanting to talk. She's been turfed out of her own office, for example, the government house where the Prime Minister sits, and she's operating from some other building.
Okay.
And so that's a problem.
Okay. Vivek, what would be the role of the monarchy? Have the choices of King Bhumibol Atulyadej been limited because there is a succession in the offing? And the army's options have also been limited because they can't conduct a coup, and a new king comes in who appoints his own generals. So those who conducted the coup would be shown the door.
You see, I for one don't use the word monarchy. I would rather focus on the personality of the current king, His Majesty, the current king. He's been a king for more than 60 years. Perhaps he's the world's oldest, longest reigning monarch. And through his personality and the way he's conducted himself, he's earned the goodwill of all Thais. But as far as political action is concerned, he was the master of the Bangkok elite and they deferred to him completely. He also earned the respect of the poorer people in the north and the northeast. He was looked upon as a symbol of someone who cared for them. Now, the monarchy in the past didn't have that respect uniformly. It's he who's done this. Now, the point is that Thaksin has introduced a principle which is completely different, where he has, in a sense, challenged the role of the king as the final benefactor of the north and the northeast. And this is at a time when the king is getting old and his health is failing. So to that extent, Thaksin is the outsider who's challenging the very apex of the Bangkok elite, which is His Majesty's position. And in the past, His Majesty was able to find, if he intervened, the crisis got resolved. Why? Because it was a crisis within the elite. This is now a new dimension to Thai politics.
All right. We need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again after the break. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the unfolding crisis in Thailand. Ambassador Gupta, do you think the king will oblige the protest leader Suthep Thaugsuban? Because Thaugsuban says that interim People's Council, People's Democratic Council Reform Committee will take over for 18 months and pave the way for a transitional government appointed by the king, assuming that the king would be on his side. So do you think the king will oblige?
You know, the king today is very old, very sick, very frail. He is not following day-to-day developments in the manner that he used to follow in the past. Also, let us be quite clear and candid about this. The institution of the monarchy per se is not the thing, it's the king's personality. Okay. But because there has been so much uncertainty in the past 10 years or so, and there is so much hope generated by this new principle that Vivek has spoken about, that the king's standing in authority has undoubtedly been compromised over the years steadily. And I cannot foresee under current circumstances the king himself, given his health and things like that, intervening in any direct fashion. Okay. It may be an intervention on his behalf by the elite, like the Privy Council, for example. Okay. Because he is running a great risk. If his intervention does not stop this, then it will be a big blow to the monarchy.
So, Pinak, is the prospect of a succession, because of the illness of the king, also preventing resolution of this crisis?
The king is a moral beacon in sort of Thailand's polity. Yeah. And but today I don't think the king is in a position to really influence. And as has been mentioned, Thaksin is the great challenger from outside, from the back of beyond, so to speak. Yeah. And hence the king is very unlikely, because if his intervention fails, then his moral authority is absolutely destroyed, which I don't think he will put online.
All right, thank you for putting that in perspective. Now, Vivek, the Democrat Party is boycotting the February 2nd elections. The National Anti-Corruption Commission has charged 308 MPs, most of them from Shinwatra's party, for on corruption charges for trying to bring in an amnesty bill to save politicians. The National Anti-Corruption Commission is also exploring charges against Prime Minister Yingluck Shinawatra in the rice subsidy case. So do you think all these things are adding up to an effort to somehow unravel the Pheu Thai party by banning some of it or banishing some of its MPs from politics, sending them, some of them abroad, maybe expelling them, basically destroy the party so that this challenge to the Bangkok elite disappears?
It doesn't matter really if even, this is part of political maneuvering, and it really doesn't matter even if this party is dissolved. After all, Thaksin's earlier party too was banned and dissolved.
Yeah.
So it is Thaksin has the capacity
Yeah.
to bring about a new party.
Yeah.
So it's really, as I've been saying, it's really a matter which has to be worked out within the Thai system. And this,
So these are broader social forces.
there are broader
in conflict.
social forces at work. Quite frankly, broader social forces and political forces at work. And at the moment, I've sensed that over the last 10 years or so, there's been a period, there's been a sense of intransigence,
Yeah, yeah.
and they've not been able to have a straight dialogue as to how to balance the interests of the new groups and the old entrenched groups.
Okay. Just to sort of take a different angle on the situation, Ambassador Gupta, what are the economic implications of this continued unrest for Thailand? Because Thailand, after all, has a unique position geographically in terms of its educated and skilled labor force and its role in the manufacturing sector in the Far East. And at a time when investors like Japan are wanting to diversify their investment out of China to other countries, would they be worried? Because the Japanese have already sort of sounded an alert, a warning about this political unrest.
Obviously, this is having very deep and increasing adverse economic implications for Thailand, and ultimately it will also impact on the economic relationships between Thailand and some of its neighbors, like India, for example. So this is this works against Thailand itself as an entity, as a country. So unless this is resolved very fast,
Yeah.
I think situation will become dismal. In fact, I am surprised that the Thai economy has not gone into a tailspin so far as much as it could have been.
Okay, quickly.
I think partly because both sides are conscious of the fact that all this crisis can lead to a meltdown, and they've tried to contain it in a way while jockeying.
There is
And
no
typically
vandalization
Yeah,
in the
typical-
protest.
yeah,
Pinak, will
typical
they be able
Thailand.
to contain it? Because the
think
Japanese would much rather invest in Vietnam and Myanmar, which are also emerging markets.
I
Why
think,
would they
I
go
think
to
the
Thailand?
Thais know that, and I think they are worried about it. After all, don't forget 1.2 million Indian tourists visit Thailand. So even that, there's a huge tourism industry which contributes about 20% of their GDP. And so these are all danger signals that are there.
Yeah.
But what is dangerous is that some of the ultra, democratic, on the democratic side, the royalist side, are talking about things like, stopping the air traffic control, stopping the stock exchange. These are very serious kind of things that they are at least threatening to do. And if that happens, then there will be serious trouble.
How does this turmoil affect Thailand's position regionally at a time when US is looking, shifting its gaze from West Asia to the Asia Pacific region, when China wants to expand its presence in Southeast Asia? Do you think Thailand will lose the strategic advantage it has because of its location and because of its regional leadership in the area?
I think Thailand, for a variety of reasons, is now, I won't use the word losing, but is going somewhat in the background. You yourself have said with the opening up of Myanmar, with Vietnam, etc. The old position that Thailand occupied, frankly, geopolitically, it became very important during the Vietnam War because of that connection. But that is now coming under threat, not only on account of this unrest, but also because of the churning in the region itself.
Okay. Ambassador Gupta, how would this turmoil impact Thailand-India relations, or do you think our relationship is turmoil-proof?
Look, our relationship is prima facie, on the face of it, very, very good. It is not going to adversely affect that, irrespective of which government comes into power.
Okay, we are running out of time. So quickly, what do you think, Pinak? Do you agree with Ambassador Gupta?
Yes, I agree, because it will not going to affect, but what will be affected are the connectivity projects and lots of other things, trilateral economic issues, Mekong Ganga corridor, and those kind of things will be affected or delayed, I would say.
Vivek?
I think we followed a very wise course of not intervening in this at all, and dealing with whichever government is in power. And having great respect and regard for the monarchy, for the king and the monarchy, which is reciprocated.
All right. Okay. So, we've run out of time. I'd like to thank all of you for coming here and analyzing this complex situation for our viewers. And I hope Thailand settles down, and we'll have you again in the studio to discuss how Thailand can be on the growth path again and on the path of stability. Thank you very much. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week with another interesting issue. Till then, goodbye.